The room was buzzing with energy, phones out, cameras rolling, and whispers filling the air. At first glance, he seemed ordinary. Just another man standing quietly at the corner of the dojo, his age marked by silver streaks in his hair and a calm, unreadable expression. But everyone who knew martial arts legends or even pop culture recognized him immediately. Steven Seagal. Across the room, a young, cocky challenger was sizing him up. Confidence radiated from every smirk and swagger in his step. He laughed under his breath, shaking his head, certain that the older man couldn't possibly match his skill. "This guy?" he muttered to a friend, voice dripping with arrogance. "Old, slow. I could take him easy." The crowd chuckled nervously, some daring to whisper, others already recording on their phones. They expected a funny spectacle, maybe a small scuffle, or nothing at all. But they had no idea how wrong they were. Steven Seagal didn't flinch. His eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the room calmly. Every muscle, every fiber of his being, radiated control and silent power. He had faced challenges far more dangerous than a young show-off trying to make a viral moment. Yet the tension in the air was palpable. Even the sound of a dropped phone or a nervous gasp felt loud. The challenger, emboldened by the crowd's laughter, stepped forward, chest puffed out. He wanted a reaction, a moment of glory, something to post online and go viral. He was convinced this would be his spotlight, the moment he could prove his dominance over an old man. "Come on, old man," he called out loudly, his smirk widening. "Show me what you got." A hush fell over the room. Cameras clicked, phones zoomed in, and the audience leaned in, curious and tense. Everyone was waiting for either a laugh, a flop, or, just maybe, a shocking twist. And that's when it happened. The first spark of tension that would soon ignite a firestorm of fear, respect, and disbelief. But before we move to what Seagal did next, pause for a second and comment below. Have you ever underestimated someone who looked weaker than you? Yes or no? I want to see what you think, because what happens in the next moments will blow you away. The room held its breath. The challenger grinned, completely unaware that in seconds, everything he thought he knew about power, skill, and fear would be turned upside down. The air in the room grew heavier. Phones were raised, recording every move, every flicker of expression. The young challenger had stepped forward with confidence, his smirk wide, his ego inflated by the laughter of the crowd. But Steven Seagal remained calm, his presence almost magnetic, commanding attention without a single word. Everyone in the room could feel it, the tension, the electricity of anticipation. The challenger, a rising star in the martial arts community, thought he was in control. He believed the older man's age, the slight stoop of his shoulders and the serene look on his face meant weakness. He was wrong. Steven's eyes scanned the room methodically. Every movement, every twitch of a finger, every subtle shift in weight was intentional. His reputation as a martial arts legend was not built on theatrics. It was earned through years of discipline, countless battles, and a level of focus few could ever comprehend. The crowd whispered among themselves. Some were skeptical, others skeptical and curious. How could one man so calm and composed seem almost untouchable? Every heartbeat seemed to echo louder. Every phone click resonated like a drum. The challenger, meanwhile, was unaware that his confidence was about to be shattered. "Come on, old man," he jeered again, this time louder, leaning forward. "Don't just stand there. Show us something." The laughter of the crowd increased, but there was an underlying tension now, a shared feeling that something significant was about to happen. Some of the onlookers exchanged glances, instinctively sensing the storm brewing between these two figures. Steven Seagal did not respond, not a single twitch, not a blink. His silence spoke volumes. It was a silence that carried years of experience, a silent warning that underestimated skill could be dangerous. The challenger, however, misread it. He thought the older man's calmness was hesitation. Then, without warning, the challenger shifted his stance, a subtle movement intended to intimidate, to assert dominance. He wanted to go viral, to prove that strength and youth could overpower experience and wisdom. But as his body moved, so did Steven, slightly, almost imperceptibly, a micro-adjustment that could easily be missed. And in that slight movement, the room felt it. A subtle warning, a signal that the older man was ready. Ready for what? They didn't yet know. But the tension spiked. Every eye in the room was locked on them. Every phone camera zoomed in. Every heartbeat raced. Pause for a second and comment below. Do you think the young challenger will win this fight? Or is he about to regret underestimating a legend? Write your guess now before watching the next part. The crowd leaned forward, phones recording, some gripping their chairs. The young challenger's confidence was visible, but so was a flicker of uncertainty, barely noticeable to him but not to the audience. And then the first spark of action, a small, almost imperceptible movement from Steven, sent a ripple through the room. It was calm. It was subtle. Yet for those watching closely, the message was clear. Do not mistake my silence for weakness, nay. The next few moments, the challenger would learn a lesson about arrogance, respect, and the raw power of experience. And the audience, both in the room and watching online, would witness something unforgettable. The challenger's grin widened, his confidence swelling with every whisper of laughter from the crowd. Phones hovered, ready to capture the moment he thought would make him famous online. He had no idea that his first move meant to impress and intimidate would only seal his fate. Watch this, he muttered, glancing at his friend. This guy can't even react. He's frozen. The room held its breath as the challenger stepped closer, his hands raised in a taunting pose. He performed a flashy kick, exaggerated, dramatic, designed more for show than effectiveness. Cameras clicked and phones zoomed in. Some of the crowd chuckled nervously, but there was an undercurrent of unease. Something didn't feel right. Steven Seagal remained motionless, calm as ever. But every subtle shift of his body betrayed readiness. His eyes, sharp and unflinching, tracked the challenger's every movement. He didn't need theatrics. Years of training had honed his perception to a point where he could predict every move before it happened. The challenger laughed, clearly delighted with his own performance. He mimicked a bow, gesturing toward the crowd, inviting their applause. Pretty good, right? He said, winking at his friend. This is going viral for sure. But the first ripple of doubt appeared in his eyes. A subtle shift in Seagal's stance, so slight that most wouldn't notice it, caused a flicker of hesitation. The challenger tried to ignore it, but his instincts screamed that something was off. He brushed it aside, confident that experience couldn't outweigh youth and arrogance. Then came the whispers. The audience, previously just entertained, began to murmur. Eyes widened. Phones wavered as people recorded, sensing the tension escalating. Something about Steven's calmness, the slight tightening of his jaw, the precise stance, spoke volumes. The room was on the edge of its seat, and the challenger made his next move, a quick feint, meant to test Seagal's reaction. He lunged forward slightly, expecting a delayed response, a stumble, a flinch, but nothing happened. The older man didn't move, not a step, not a blink. The silence was deafening. Every phone in the room captured it. Every spectator froze. The young man's grin faltered. He laughed nervously, realizing that this was not a simple show. What the? He didn't even react? Come on, man. This is supposed to be easy. The audience started to whisper warnings. Some veterans in the crowd exchanged glances, recognizing the aura of a man who had faced real danger and survived. Others, younger viewers, leaned in closer, fascinated. And then, just as the challenger prepared for another exaggerated move, the subtle tension became electric. It wasn't aggression, but anticipation. It wasn't fear, but respect. The audience could feel it building, a storm about to break, the moment where arrogance would meet experience head-on. Every eye was on them. Every heartbeat in the room quickened. And in the next few seconds, everything the challenger thought he knew about power and control would be completely shattered. The challenger, still grinning, thought he had the upper hand. He had tried flashy kicks, dramatic feints, even taunts, and yet Steven Seagal had not flinched. Not once. The silence in the room had shifted. It was no longer casual amusement. A low, almost imperceptible tension hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. This guy, he's not even reacting, the challenger muttered under his breath, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. He must be tired. Or old. The crowd leaned forward, sensing that something extraordinary was about to happen. Phones hovered, cameras zoomed in, but no one could predict the moment that would change everything. Steven Seagal remained calm, his face a mask of composure. His body moved almost imperceptibly, micro-adjustments that a novice wouldn't notice, but which spoke volumes to anyone trained in martial arts. The air seemed to tighten, every exhale held, every whisper hushed. The challenger, thinking he could force a reaction, lunged forward with a rapid, exaggerated strike. More for spectacle than precision. The crowd flinched as his fist flew through the air. He expected Seagal to block, to parry, or maybe even flinch. But nothing happened. And then, it happened. In a motion so fluid, so fast, it almost looked like the air itself had moved, Steven Seagal countered. Not with brute force, not with aggression, but with a precision that left the room frozen. One subtle movement, a redirection of energy, and the challenger found himself off balance, stunned by the mastery of his opponent. Time seemed to slow. Every eye in the room widened. Phones captured the moment in slow motion, replaying over and over in the minds of the audience. The challenger's smirk vanished. Confidence, arrogance, the sense of invincibility, all shattered in one swift, almost imperceptible motion. What just happened? Someone whispered from the back. Did you see that? Another voice exclaimed, shaky with disbelief. The challenger staggered, trying to recover, his eyes darting nervously. He had underestimated the depth of experience, the sheer control, and the calm ruthlessness that came from decades of training and real-world combat. He had assumed youth and energy could overpower age and wisdom. But he was wrong. Steven Seagal didn't raise his voice. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His calm presence was more powerful than any display of aggression the challenger could muster. His gaze, sharp and unwavering, carried a warning. Arrogance would be met with consequences. The audience gasped, a collective intake of breath that seemed to echo off the walls. Some spectators instinctively stepped back, others whispered to each other, recognizing that what they had just witnessed was more than a demonstration. It was a lesson in respect, in skill, and in the dangers of underestimating a legend. The challenger, for the first time, faltered. His usual bravado crumbled under the weight of what had just occurred. He took a hesitant step back, chest heaving, eyes wide. The crowd's murmurs grew louder. Phones were still recording, capturing every detail, every flicker of realization that the young challenger had misjudged his opponent. Pause here for a second. Could you have handled this situation? Would you back off or keep trying to show off? Steven Seagal's subtle counter had done more than unbalance the challenger. It had humbled him. The room was silent now, except for the soft shuffle of nervous feet and the quiet hum of phones capturing history. No one had ever expected such calm, calculated precision from someone who, at first glance, appeared old and unassuming. The challenger's face drained of color. Pride, ego, and confidence, the very traits that had led him to this moment, were replaced by shock, fear, and a growing respect. And as the room held its collective breath, one thought ran through everyone's mind. Never underestimate a legend. Steven Seagal stepped slightly forward, a subtle, almost imperceptible movement, but it carried weight. The challenger instinctively stepped back, unsure whether to challenge again or retreat. The crowd leaned in closer, sensing that the final act of this confrontation was yet to come. And that final act would leave everyone in the room, online and offline, stunned, questioning everything they thought they knew about skill, respect, and true mastery. The challenger's confident stance crumbled like a house of cards. His chest heaved, sweat beading on his forehead, not from exertion but from shock. Every ounce of bravado he had carried into the room evaporated in the wake of Steven Seagal's subtle yet devastating counter. The crowd was silent. Phones hovered, zoomed in, recording every second. The murmurs had turned into whispers of disbelief. No one could believe what had just happened. Some spectators instinctively stepped back, instinctively recognizing that this was no ordinary confrontation. This was a lesson in mastery, patience, and the consequences of arrogance. I don't understand, the challenger stammered, voice wavering. How did he do that? Steven Seagal's calm presence didn't waver. He didn't need to explain. His actions spoke louder than words ever could. The challenger had assumed that flashy moves, theatrics, and youthful energy were enough to dominate. But skill, experience, and control could not be faked, and that truth was now written across the young man's face. The room's energy shifted. What had started as a spectacle designed for entertainment and social media glory had become a moment of intense respect and awe. The audience leaned in, their collective attention unwavering. Every person in the room, young or old, felt the gravity of the moment. The challenger tried to regain his footing, to salvage some fragment of pride. He attempted another flashy kick, hoping to force a reaction to prove he could still control the narrative. But it was too late. The subtle micro-movements that Seagal had used before were now a warning. One small shift from the older man and the challenger instinctively froze, unsure what would come next. Some of the spectators whispered to each other, "That guy. He didn't even have to touch him." It's not about strength. It's about precision, control, and respect. And then the unexpected happened. The challenger, still standing, began to visibly tremble. His jaw tightened, and for the first time, fear replaced arrogance. He realized he had underestimated not just the skill, but the discipline, experience, and mental fortitude of someone who had truly mastered their craft. The audience's phones captured the full spectrum of the young challenger's transformation. He went from smug confidence to nervous hesitation, disbelief, and finally, humbling respect, all within seconds. Social media watchers would later describe this moment as a lesson in humility everyone needed to see. Seagal's calmness was not passive. It was a force. Every micro-adjustment, every subtle weight shift conveyed mastery and focus. The challenger, realizing that he was outmatched, took a step back. And that step, small as it seemed, spoke volumes. It was the first step of recognition, acknowledging that skill, patience, and discipline could not be rushed or mocked. The murmurs in the room grew louder. Spectators, many of whom had initially been skeptical, now whispered in admiration. Some even clutched their phones to record for posterity, knowing they were witnessing history. A few veterans in the back exchanged knowing glances. They understood instantly. This was not just a demonstration of martial arts, it was a life lesson about arrogance, humility, and respect. The challenger's hands dropped to his sides, his face pale. His chest heaved with nervous breaths. He had gone too far, pushed too hard, and now he faced the consequences. The laughter, the whispers, the cheers, all had stopped. Only silence remained, punctuated by the soft hum of cameras and the distant echo of the crowd's collective awe. Steven. Seagal's eyes never left him. His calm, unyielding gaze was a reminder. Mastery was earned, not flaunted, and arrogance, no matter how flashy, would always falter in the presence of true skill. The challenger finally lowered his head, swallowing hard. There was no more smirk, no more confidence. Only respect and a growing understanding of what he had underestimated. He had learned something in those seconds that would stay with him forever. Power without discipline is nothing. Showmanship without respect is empty, and, as the crowd exhaled collectively, phones still recording, the energy in the room shifted again. What had been a viral spectacle in the making had become a lesson in humility, a story that would ripple across social media, trending worldwide as viewers shared and debated every detail of the confrontation. Every eye remained fixed on Steven Seagal, every heartbeat synchronized with the quiet intensity radiating from the man who had turned arrogance into a teachable moment. And for the challenger, the lesson had only just begun. The moment ended, but its impact had just begun. Phones in the crowd kept recording as spectators replayed the final micro-movement of Steven Seagal. Social media notifications exploded as snippets of the confrontation were uploaded in real time. Within minutes, the hashtag #Seagal Challenge was trending worldwide. Viewers across platforms paused, replayed, and shared. Comments flooded in. That kid got absolutely schooled. Never underestimate experience. Seagal didn't even flinch. Unreal. People were captivated, mesmerized by the calm mastery that had humbled the young challenger. Back in the room, the challenger's face remained pale, his chest rising and falling with nervous breaths. He had gone from confident bravado to total humility in a matter of seconds. For the first time, he understood that the viral fame he had been chasing was meaningless compared to the lesson he had just received. The audience began to react, some quietly applauding, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Veterans whispered to each other, nodding in acknowledgement. They recognized the essence of skill and discipline. Some younger viewers were stunned, realizing that the flashy moves and theatrics they had admired online were no substitute for real experience. Did anyone else just feel that chill? One teenager whispered to her friend, her phone still recording. Yeah, that was insane, her friend replied, eyes wide. Meanwhile, the challenger's friends looked on, torn between sympathy and shock. He had sought attention, validation, and laughs, but what he got instead was a lesson in humility broadcast to the world. The contrast was stark. Seagal's calm presence and the challenger's nervous energy had created a perfect visual and emotional narrative for the audience. The crowd began to disperse, yet the energy lingered. Phones buzzed with notifications as clips went viral. News outlets caught wind of it almost immediately. By the time the spectators left the building, the story had already reached millions. Headlines screamed, "Teen challenged Steven Seagal. Instant. Humbling goes viral. Legend versus bravado. What happens when arrogance meets experience?" Seagal's calm response shocks the internet. Across social media, viewers debated every detail. Some analyzed Seagal's subtle counter, praising the precision and timing. Others discussed the psychology behind the challenger's arrogance, marveling at how quickly it collapsed. Memes flooded in, gifs of the iconic moment circulated, and reaction videos began to trend. The challenger, now isolated from the crowd, finally looked around. Phones were still pointed at him, recording. The realization hit him hard. This moment, meant to make him famous, had become a viral cautionary tale. He had underestimated someone far beyond his experience. And the audience, millions watching online, had seen it all. Parents of viewers everywhere began to comment on the importance of humility and respect. Teachers and martial arts enthusiasts shared the clips, praising Seagal's composure and the educational aspect of the encounter. The story wasn't just viral for entertainment. It became a discussion point about respect, discipline, and real-world consequences. The challenger's parents finally noticed the extent of the viral storm. Their phones blew up with notifications from friends, colleagues, and even media outlets. The pursuit of fame had backfired spectacularly. What was supposed to be a fun, attention-grabbing stunt had instead painted a lesson in stark public terms. Meanwhile, Steven Seagal quietly returned to his place. Calm, composed, almost invisible in his humility. He didn't gloat. He didn't comment. His presence alone had conveyed the lesson. Every eye in the room, every viewer online, had witnessed it. Respect had been earned silently, without a word. As the crowd left and the cameras continued to capture, the viral momentum grew. Millions had already watched, shared, and discussed. The challenger had become a worldwide symbol of arrogance humbled, and the legend, as calm and unshakable as ever, had reminded the world that true skill transcends age, theatrics, and social media. The stage was now set. Social media buzzed. The challenger was humbled, and the world was watching, hungry for the next chapter. How would the young man respond? Could he turn this viral lesson into personal growth, or would arrogance take hold once again? The world had watched. Millions had seen the challenger humbled in front of Steven Seagal. Social media was still buzzing. Clips trending, hashtags exploding. Yet for the young man, the viral fame he had sought felt heavier than any applause. He didn't feel victorious. He felt exposed, vulnerable. And for the first time, he wondered if respect mattered more than likes. Seagal didn't gloat. He remained calm, letting the silence carry the weight of the lesson. But he wasn't done. A quiet mentor's instinct took over. "Kid," Seagal said, his voice low but firm, drawing the challenger's attention. "You wanted to show the world you were tough, but you learned the hard way that arrogance is no substitute for skill. That's a lesson you carry, or forget at your own risk." The challenger swallowed hard, his face flushed, eyes downcast. Words felt useless now. He had seen firsthand what discipline, patience, and respect could achieve, and he had felt the sting of underestimating someone far beyond his understanding. Steven Seagal took a small step closer, demonstrating calm authority. He spoke not to dominate, but to teach. Every action has a consequence. Every choice shapes who you are, and how you treat others, especially those who've dedicated their lives to something greater than themselves, defines your character. The young man nodded slowly, realizing this was more than a physical confrontation. This was a life lesson, one that would stick long after the cameras stopped rolling. The crowd, sensing the shift, leaned forward. Phones still recorded, but now the energy in the room was different, hopeful, reflective, almost reverent. Spectators whispered among themselves, witnessing a rare moment, a public lesson in humility, delivered not with anger, but with wisdom. Seagal extended a hand, a gesture of reconciliation, not dominance. "You've got potential," he said. "Learn from this. Humble yourself, listen, and you can be stronger than you ever imagined." The challenger hesitated for a heartbeat, then took the hand. The grip was firm, grounding, real. It was a handshake that spoke volumes, respect earned, arrogance tempered. The crowd exhaled collectively, a wave of relief and admiration washing over the room. In the days that followed, the story went viral worldwide. Videos of the encounter reached millions across YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. But unlike typical viral stunts, this story carried meaning. It sparked conversations, parents discussing respect with children, teachers emphasizing humility in classrooms, martial artists debating discipline versus bravado. The challenger, now humbled, embraced the opportunity for growth. He began training seriously, not to show off, but to understand, to respect, and to improve. He reflected on what had happened, documenting his journey on social media with authenticity rather than arrogance. Millions followed, not for drama or shock value, but to witness transformation and personal growth. Before we continue, pause and comment. Have you ever had a moment that humbled you completely? Share your story. Let's inspire each other. Meanwhile, Seagal quietly returned to his routine, the calm force that had inspired millions. The challenger's story became a case study in respect, skill, and personal growth. Viral for all the right reasons, it showed the world that true power wasn't in spectacle, but in mastery, restraint, and wisdom. In private, the young man reflected on his actions. The thrill of likes and views had faded, replaced by a deeper understanding. The fear, the shock, the embarrassment, it had all been a teacher in disguise. He realized that viral fame could be fleeting, but lessons learned through humility and respect were permanent. Months later, he returned to a martial arts dojo. Seagal's teachings echoed in his mind: precision, patience, respect. The lessons were no longer theoretical, they were lived. Every move, every stance, every disciplined step reminded him of that viral moment, the world watching, the lesson learned. Social media still buzzed with clips, reactions, and remixes, but the challengers and journey transformed the narrative. No longer just a viral stunt, it became a story of redemption, of growth, and of understanding that some moments in life are bigger than fame, bigger than ego, and bigger than the screen. The story ended with a simple truth. True respect is earned, not demanded. True skill is silent, not flashy. And sometimes the greatest victories are the ones you don't see online. They're the ones you carry inside. As the video fades out, the voiceover leaves the audience with a thought. Remember, respect, humility, and discipline are lessons the world can't teach with likes or views. But when lived, they become legendary. Could you have handled what he did? Comment below, because the lesson doesn't stop here. The screen fades to black. Silence. And the legend of the encounter lives on, a viral story that isn't just about spectacle. It's about character, growth, and the moment the world learned that arrogance meets its match in mastery.